Hi, welcome to Access Spotlight. I'm Travis Youssef. Today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Kellen Curry. Kellen is a Republican resident who's running to be the next U.S. representative of New York's 3rd Congressional District. Welcome, Kellen. So happy to have you here today with us.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me. This is a pleasure. I'm looking forward to speaking with you and the community.
Yeah, well, thank you again for being here. So Kellen, talk to us about your mission of restoring honesty and integrity back to New York 3 leadership.
Absolutely. We know we're in a challenging time right now in terms of our congressional representation. I'm a third-generation veteran. I'm an Afghanistan war veteran. I've had friends and family serve in the military, certainly friends and classmates that went to Afghanistan and did not come back. And so I just refuse to let their service, their sacrifice be represented by anything but the best leadership that our country has to provide. Right now, we know we're not getting that in the 3rd District of New York. And so I've stepped up to the plate to do something about it. And we've been at it for 4 months now. We've gotten good traction around the district. You know, the number one job of Congress is to make sure the American people in our homeland is kept safe and secure. And so I look forward to leading with that experience. And we need people in Congress who have that experience. And I look forward to being the next member of Congress from the 3rd District.
No, that's great, Kellen. And, thank you for your service. I really appreciate that. And your website does state, as Congressman, you'll stand for truth, New York values, and work every day to secure a future. Talk to us about some of those New York values you mentioned.
Yeah, well, we know one thing here that's impacting Long Island families is affordability and cost of living. And I think one thing that's interesting about New York that has made New York is the ability for people to come here not by birth but by choice, which is my story of coming to New York. And one thing we have to do is make sure that people can stay here. And so we've been looking at things that we can do on the federal level to ensure that happens. One thing that we can do is continue to push on the SALT cap, federal deduction cap that was placed, and the relief of that cap. The second thing I think we can do is make sure that we restore the low-income housing tax credit to make it more possible for developers to bring more housing product online. We know that we have a housing crisis on Long Island. There's not enough product at different tiers of housing for families. I think the third thing that we can do is adjust the federal poverty level. So right now it's $30,000. We know that on Long Island it's about $55,000 is what a family of four would need to essentially be at the federal poverty limit level. So to the extent that we can not only adjust that level for inflation, but also for cost of living would be a good thing for families. We know that our distribution centers, our food distribution centers are stressed right now. And so people are getting less from those centers. These are our food pantries on Long Island. So the food insecurity is real. The cost of living is real. And so those are some of the kitchen table issues that we're focused on in this campaign.
Oh, that's great. That's great, Kellen. Now, tell me a little bit about, now I know you're originally from Oklahoma, so how did you end up, here in the great state of New York?
Yeah, so, Dad was a retired naval officer. Mom is a decades-long federal civil servant. Both of them worked at Tinker Air Force Base, which is right outside of Oklahoma City. I practically grew up on that base. I remember being shuttled back and forth, watching Mom and Dad do their thing. And so it was always in my heart and in my, sights to have my own story of service. And I was happy to do that and go to the Air Force Academy and serve our country for 8 years in the Air Force. Eventually left and went to business school and then started working at J.P. Morgan here a few years ago. And so I've been doing that up until about March of this year, and then we started our campaign in April. And so that's kind of how I got to New York. But again, my story is quintessential New York, here by choice. I think this is a great place to live and to work and to experience life, and happy to be here and happy to put myself up for service for the people of the 3rd District.
And you had mentioned before when we were talking that you had just moved to Carl Place.
Yeah.
So, what brought you to Nassau County to live here, to really settle down and, put down roots?
Yeah. When I first got to New York, I was living in Long Island City and lived there for a number of years. My home in Long Island City was just only 10 miles outside of our district. So I certainly have a lot of familiarity with Nassau County. In fact, I'm still in the reserves and, in the military reserves. I work for an agency called the Defense Contract Management Agency, which has an office in Garden City. And so I would often commute in and out of New York City, Long Island City into Garden City. And so got familiar with Long Island that way. And once we learned about Mr. Santos, I decided that, I needed to step up to the plate and look at this. And so I did, and it made sense. And so, happy to be here and started our campaign. And, we've been at it for the last 4 months and have gotten good support around the district and around the country.
Great. Awesome, Kellen. Oh, that's awesome. Talk to me a little bit about, you talked about, growing up with your parents, seeing what they did, going back and forth and learning about that service. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Sure. I think, for me, growing up in a family of, I'm a third generation veteran, obviously mom and dad, served. I think it's important. I think it's important that young people find ways to serve, maybe not so, in the military, but certainly in other ways. And it's encouraging. Our campaign is harnessing that energy. We have so many young people reach out and want to be a part, want to, intern or volunteer or just be engaged. And so it's a positive thing. I think for me, growing up as a kid, it was something that I saw them do and take great pride in. And so it's something that I wanted to emulate and make sure that I had that service at some point in my life. And I was happy to do that right out of high school.
Yeah,
So,
no, that's wonderful. And during your time, with the U.S. Air Force, we had talked just briefly about, tell me about your time and the work that you did in Afghanistan and really the impact that not only had on you, but had on that community.
Yeah, I went to Afghanistan twice, and the second time I was there was really impactful. I got the opportunity to travel the country, got the opportunity to live actually on an Afghan base and work more closely, shoulder to shoulder with the Afghan people. It was transformational for me to see the war effort up close and to work so closely with the Afghans. You get a real sense of how much they love their country. You get a sense of how special America is for the contributions that we made, and you get a sense of how much they want to live in peace and how much they did not like the Taliban. They were doing everything they can to make sure that they created a future for themselves and for their families. My role there, I think that was 2014, 2015. It was interesting. The U.S. government and Russian relations were actually very positive in the early 2000s, and we bought about 30 helicopters from the Russians. And so we were trying to outfit these helicopters with more armaments and things like that, so that the Afghanistan version of essentially the 82nd Airborne could be operational. And we started that unit. We stood that unit up. My job was to make sure that we kept these planes in the air. So providing for the procurement of everything that was related to doing that. And it was a tremendous, opportunity to learn not only, from our own coalition partners, because it was a NATO mission. And this gets into what we're doing with NATO right now in Ukraine. NATO is a extremely important organization, but then that mission in Afghanistan was also important for the global war on terrorism. So, tremendously positive experience for me to leverage into this role, into serving in Congress and making sure that we have a strong voice on national security.
Great. No, that's awesome, Kellen. What is it that you pride yourself on serving the community?
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing is being out there, being a presence, getting on doorsteps and making sure that the concerns of people, the concerns of the community is heard. We're not, I'm not only on doorsteps, but I'm being invited into kitchen tables and to couches and to really hear the hopes and fears of our constituents and residents. I've been spending a lot of time recently at the Merchant Marine Academy, which is located right here in our district. And there's a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done in terms of making sure that institution has a good federal partner to deliver the federal funding and resources it needs to realize its true mission. You know, when we think about China, the merchant mariners play a important role to sustaining naval operations in the South China Sea and to supporting that mission. So it's important that we rebuilt the campus at the Merchant Marine Academy. I look forward to leading that charge in Congress. It's a tremendous institution, and we need to do everything we can to uplift it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. For sure, Kellen. Talk to me also a little bit about your 4 milestones thus far. You know, I was on your website. You talk about following in footsteps, service and sacrifice, learning the ropes, and fighting for truth.
Yeah. You know, so much of my experience obviously is in service. And as I mentioned before, you know, I'm a 3rd-generation veteran. I think there's so many lessons about serving your country, especially at a young age. You know, that's very transformative and formative because you're thrown into situations where you have to get along with people that you don't know, that don't look like you, that, you know, you don't know their political persuasion. And I think it's, you know, it teaches you to be mission focused and not so much concerned about necessarily, you know, how people may look and feel, and I think we need more of that, you know, in our politics. And I think young people embody that. I think there's a lot of people in the district that embody that want to see members of Congress work together, get along, work, you know, reach across the aisle. And so, I'm a kitchen table issue Republican, and so it's been tremendously positive to see so many people in the community embrace that. And so I think that's one thing that service has done for me. You know, the other milestone that you mentioned was working in our nation's economy. Obviously, there are so many people who are worried about a recession. I think maybe, you know, we pulled back from those concerns a little bit as inflation has come down. We have to continue to rein in spending and keep the administration accountable for that. Like I mentioned, food security before. So, you know, those things kind of feed into what we're experiencing here on Long Island. And then, you know, the last thing about, you know, truth and honesty. There's so much we have to do to restore truth and honesty here in the district because of the current leadership that we have. I think my service background lends itself to being able to do that and to go into the Air Force Academy, which has a you know, a strong code of ethics. Obviously, the Air Force has a strong code of ethics, and coming up and learning that and you know, being able to carry those values with me into this campaign and into Congress.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Kellen. No, for sure. And I mean, and you know, I would say that, like you had mentioned with the government, you know, there is an overall sense of frustration, disenchantment with the government nationwide. You know, people are either really fired up or they just throw up their hands. What I hear often is that, you know, they don't feel confident in or trust politicians. What do you think can be done to change that point of view?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you have to lead with authenticity. And I think you have to be honest with people about the current state of affairs. And you have to be honest about what you can get done. And I think so many times we look at politics and with, you know, either the glamorous side or the scandalous side of politics so many times. And I think what we've tried to do in our campaign is break through that and let people see and be a part of our process. You know, here in a few days, we're going to update our website with our platform. And that platform, so much of that is reflective of the feedback that we've gotten from the community. And so we've gotten good buy-in. Certainly, I've got into this with my own ideas, but we felt like part of restoring trust was to launch a campaign, wait a few months, get out into the community, get feedback on what we thought, what we think, where we think the community should go, and then release a platform that, you know, people can rally around and support from day one. And so that's the first step, is how you campaign, and that's something that we've done that's a little unique. You know, most politicians, when they run for office, you know, they immediately you see a platform and issues that are put out there, but we kind of did it a little bit different. So. And then I think the other thing is constituency services. You always have to be engaged in the community. I've talked about restoring the gold standard of constituency services is how I phrase it. And, you know, coming from a family of federal servants, obviously having worked in the military, I know how the federal government works. I look forward to working with our veterans and our seniors and our immigrant families here in the district to make sure that we deliver the constituency services that they deserve. And so constantly being a presence in the community is extremely important to establishing trust.
No, absolutely, Kellen. And just kind of bringing all this up, are you the first one in your family to get into politics?
Yeah, I am. We're not a political family
Sure.
by any means. I like to say I'm new to politics, but I'm not new to service. So this is different for us, but everybody has been extremely supportive, and it's empowering to feel that support and have that network of support. So I truly appreciate family and friends that have rallied around this effort.
No, it's great, Kellen. And I think you briefly touched on this before, but obviously the job can sometimes be thankless. What made you want to run for Congress?
Yeah, I think for me, watching how we left Afghanistan, watching the 13 Marines that we lost, the Afghans clinging from planes, my own, service there, the fact that I had friends, classmates from the Air Force Academy that went there that did not come back home, unfortunately. And then looking at the former leadership that we have, and realizing that we need people to step up and to serve, who come from a background of service, and who have come from a background of putting people first, of defending the country. I certainly have that. And so just felt a tremendous responsibility to think about getting into this. And as I did that, it made more sense. Things kind of fell into place. And so I decided to go for it. And so it's been a tremendous, learning experience for sure, being a first-time candidate. But what you find is that a lot of people want the same thing. They want good leadership. They want to be able to look to our Congress members and know that their concerns and their interests are being advocated for. And so that's been encouraging. There's a loud majority. There's a quiet majority out there. There's a loud minority that you see on cable news and all that stuff. But most people are common sense. Most people are kitchen table issue focused, and that's the core of our campaign. And that's why we've gotten so much support so far.
Yeah, no, awesome, Kellen. It's really great. You had mentioned before about you had moved here to work with JP Morgan. How do you think your time at JP Morgan's corporate investment bank will benefit you during this campaign?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no greater, at least for me, there was no greater, opportunity out there than to work at JP Morgan in the capacity that I did in the corporate and investment bank, in terms of learning how the nation's economy works, how the financial markets work, learning how we talk a lot about inflation, but so much of inflation is about the signals that the market gets, and the participants along the value chain or the supply chain, and the signals that they get from the market to lower prices. And so learning about how that works, learning about how that can be translated into public policy is tremendously important for our next member, especially in this era of high inflation, because we still have work to do. So much of what we're seeing in the numbers is not being translated to the kitchen table. So we're still seeing families struggle, and so we need members who understand how the nation's economy works.
Yeah, for sure. And then, I don't think it'll really ever happen, but I've always felt that there should be a cap on the monies allowed to be invested into a campaign, so that there is an equal playing field. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I tell you what, I mean, competing here in New York in a expensive media market, there's so much pressure on me and other candidates to raise money. So I guess a cap would make it much more easier or less pressure filled. Certainly, there is an individual cap. I imagine what you're talking about is an overall cap on campaigns. I think it would be, I think there would be some constitutional concerns with First Amendment rights on a cap, and so we've had a few. I think the McCain-Feingold Act in 2003 sought to introduce caps on campaigning and some other reforms, and so we've been through this debate before. I think coming out of the Supreme Court cases related to this issue has determined that that there's some First Amendment concerns, and so I wouldn't necessarily do a cap. Obviously, it would be helpful, I think, in some ways, in terms of not not forcing me to raise so much money to compete. But I do think it's a testament of your level of support
Sure.
In the community and around the country, and so. So I wouldn't necessarily automatically be in favor of a cap right now.
Okay. All right, great. And, as we know, the community's gone through some changes over the years, as most do. Unfortunately, there seems to be tension between the different groups within the community, empty stores. It's really expensive to live, like you had mentioned before, in Nassau County. What are some accomplishments you've achieved when it comes to the community, and what do you hope to achieve?
Yeah. The biggest accomplishment is my service to the country. When I think about what my service means to every community in the country, the first job of Congress is to make sure that the American people in our homeland are kept safe and secure. And my contribution to national security, my contribution to understanding how cybersecurity technology works and how it impacts our military in terms of being ready to fight and to succeed in that domain is a benefit for every community, in the country. And so when you talk about running for the national legislature, when you talk about running for Congress, I think the real question is, what have you done, for the country as well? And so much of my experience is related to working in national security, working in our nation's economy, and those are the things that will be of benefit to this community and to so many other communities around the country.
No, for sure, Kellen. No, I agree. What would you say drives you?
Yeah. I think, one thing that when I walked across the stage at the Air Force Academy, the Chief of Staff, General Swartz, he said, "Lead them well." And when he shook our hands. And I think so much of that is related to the fact that we want to be led well. People want good leadership. Yeah. There's so many things out there in our society today that are distractions, that are concerning, everything from social media and children to the rise of China and aggression in the South China Sea. And so we desperately need good leadership to navigate us through the complex challenges of the 21st century, particularly as we move deeper into the 21st century and as we become a more diverse country and society. So I think what motivates me is leadership, is providing good leadership, is coming from a background where I was taught, and drilled in my everything about who I am is to be a good leader. And right now I see that we're not getting that. And so it's motivating me to do something about it. And that's why I'm here.
What would you say makes a great leader?
Yeah, empathy, knowing your people. So much about what we experience in the military is certainly about the equipment and the armament and the weapon systems and all that. But what makes our military great is our people. And so if people aren't motivated, if they're not inspired to defend their country, to serve honorably, then nothing else matters.
For sure.
And you can see it, in our current representation, right? I mean, with no integrity, nothing gets done. And so, we have a member that is the most ineffective member, quite frankly, because nobody wants to work with them. So nothing gets done for the district, nothing gets done for the country. So it's foundational. So knowing your people is foundational. Leading with integrity is foundational. These are things that we were taught at the Air Force Academy and taught in the Air Force as an officer, and those are things I look forward to bringing with me into this campaign and into Congress.
No, that's great, Kellen. And I mean, look, at the end of the day, it really does all start at the top. So you really need that strong leadership. To be able to show that, you care. Right. And that's really what it's all about, empathy, like you had said. Talk to me also a little bit about, your work with, with the Positive Coaching Alliance and that you were a part of and whatnot.
Yeah, so I've had the opportunity, I was a high school football coach for a little while in Texas, and it was more fun than I ever thought I'd have, to be honest with you. And so, giving back in that way, athletics meant so much to me as a kid growing up. It opened up more doors than would have been open had I not, been so involved. And so I know the value of sports. I know the value of coaching in a kid's life. I mean, you have mom and dad, but there's nothing like, a coach that keeps you accountable, that pushes you in a way that's different from, the way mom and dad do. And so it adds stability and discipline to the life of a child. I even had high school, coaches show up to my college, graduation, and high school coaches that I still, remain in close contact with today. And so they are lifelong relationships that really add a lot of richness to the life of a young person. And so with Positive Coaching Alliance, it's a national nonprofit that seeks to create positive sporting environments for kids. There's a tremendous equity gap right now because we've kind of have evolved to a lot of club sports. And if you have a kid and they're involved in club sports, it's expensive. And so a lot of other kids are kind of being left behind. And so the Positive Coaching Alliance is there to kind of fill that gap and to ensure that the kids that are being left behind still have an opportunity to engage in sports, to have a relationship with coaches, and so it's a very, very positive thing, as the name would suggest.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah.
No, absolutely, Kellen. And I mean, that speaks volumes too. I mean, again, you talk about leadership, talk about coaching, and I think we all have people in our lives that we can always look back to, whether it's a coach or a teacher or someone that really impacted you. And again, you're adding that value to their life, which is so important, especially when it comes to our kids.
Absolutely.
Talk to me, just to kind of wrap up here. I know you talked a little bit about what drives you, but greatest accomplishment, achievement, so far?
Yeah. There was definitely a tear-filled phone call to mom and dad after about probably that first year at the Air Force Academy.
Okay.
And I was ready to give it up and go home. There's so many demands that institution places on an 18 and 19-year-old kid coming out of high school. And that's just different and unique from other college, settings and experiences. But they were there. They were motivating. They were supportive. Same thing with coaches, from high school. And so I'm glad I stuck with it. And I'm glad I had that character building moment to stick with it. I mean, it added tremendous experience or a tremendous value to my life in terms of the networks and the friendships with my classmates, and in terms of serving in places like Afghanistan that I mentioned earlier. So I wouldn't be here, I don't think, without that foundational experience. And so just tremendously happy that I was able to walk across that stage, four long years later.
Sure.
But yeah, I would say that was very, that stands out in my mind as something I'm proud of.
Awesome, Kellen. No, it's really wonderful. And then the last question here, that we ask everybody is, why is it important to go out and vote?
Oh my goodness! Well, I think our current leadership is Exhibit A, but it's important because it is the way that we as a free people demonstrate and show how we think and how we feel about our democracy and the direction of our democracy. And so, to have your voice registered in that way is the American way. Is how we reflect that. I think campaigns in a free country and a democracy are our way of taking the temperature of a community and how a community thinks and feels, and that all results in a vote. And so I'm hopeful that people will go on kellencurry.com and get familiar with our campaign and understand, how we are approaching this, and they will go vote, and they will go vote for us is what my hope is. But I encourage everybody to get out and do their civic duty and to take part in this very important election. We have an opportunity to push the reset button on our congressional leadership, and so we can't let that opportunity go by.
Sure. Yeah, definitely, Kellen. Any last words that you want to let everybody know at home?
Yeah, well, I guess I already plugged my website.
Yeah,
so,
no, it's great.
But I would definitely encourage folks to go to kellencurry.com, sign up to receive our updates. Pretty soon we're going to start being more kind of out there in the community and doing some canvassing and door knocking, and I look forward to being able to interact with folks from all across the district. So I'm a kitchen table issue Republican. I'm focused on making sure we get our district back on track in terms of our interests and our equities, and making sure that they get carried in the Congress by effective leadership. And I look forward to engaging the community to make sure we get that done. Awesome.
Great, Kellen. Well, you did say that your platform is going to be coming out. So just maybe real quick, just one thing from the platform that you're really excited about? Yeah.
We talked a little bit about service, and we talked about the youth vote. And one thing that I'm putting out there on the table is a year of national service, and in addition to all the other issues all the other kitchen table issues. And so not only are we talking about, inflation and food insecurity and things like that. But we're also leading with vision. And I think a year of national service, especially at a time when military recruitment is at an all-time low, when political polarization in our country is at an all-time high. I think a year of national service for young people would be tremendously positive for the country in terms of unifying our country. And so it's a visionary thing that we have in our platform, and I look forward to getting feedback on how people think and feel about it. And then values. We're leading with kitchen table issues, with vision, and with values. And so much of what you're going to see is about values, ethics reform, and things like that. So,
Great.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, Kellen, thanks so much for being here again.
Absolutely.
And thank you for watching Access Spotlight. Have a great night.